Okay, we are live. Oh, all right, folks. We are joined by All About Liz, and this episode is going to be all about Liz. We're going to get to know her a little better. So, Liz, thank you very much for coming on the show. We've had a few conversations on the Left Wing Pod. She's been there at least twice. I can't remember how many times she's been on, but she's an excellent guest, and I'd already been following her content on TikTok, and I recommend you do the same. But if we want to start, I always like to get to know the background of the guests that we have. So if you could start with telling us, where you grew up, how you got into politics and everything like that.
Sure. So I've only been on TikTok here posting for a little over a year now. Thank you for the shout out. But I know we're going to talk about my background a little bit more, but I was a military brat. So because my family moved around a lot from when I was really young, well, that's part of the reason why, but my family homeschooled me. The other reason was I was raised very conservative Christian. And so they, didn't want me learning about things like evolution and, you know, evolution in school. So they homeschooled me. So, I moved around a lot. I was also homeschooled. So I got my GED when I turned 16, which is as soon as I could in my state. Started working. I went right into hair school right when I turned 16. I just wanted to get out of there. So
Yeah, I was going to ask, why did you drop out of school?
I didn't drop out. I was okay. Oh, wait. Okay. Homeschooled. Let me explain it. It was worse than that. They did what was called.
Oh, I
Did I tell
okay.
you about this? Unschooling?
Yeah, I used to be a recruiter for the army, and I ran across this a lot where homeschoolers would have their curriculum at home, but the school was through like a Christian curriculum that wasn't an official high school diploma, so they had to go get a GED to, complete their education.
Oh, that's interesting. No, I didn't have that experience. My parents did what was called unschooling, which to my knowledge is still a thing. Like it's still what happens, and it's something that happens, I should say. And it's exactly how it sounds, right? It's often these like crunchy parents who have the idea that life will teach your child all they need to know, so they don't follow like a set curriculum. Genuinely, I don't know how it's legal, how these people get away with it. Um, well, my family is white, but that's how they got away with it. It was also, almost 20 years ago now. But um so they unschooled me, right? So I realized pretty early on that like to do anything, I was gonna have to either go to college or go to trade
Yeah.
school. And I needed some sort of high school diploma for that. And I wasn't going to school. So when I was like 13 or 14, I started just doing GED training. And I was like, this is what I'm gonna do. And I looked into the requirements for it. And that's also when I started working. The state that I lived in, you could get like a worker's permit or something when you were a minor and would work like 20 hours a week,
Yeah.
something like that. And I was like, okay, well, I'm just gonna do that and save up and move out because
Yeah. So I've not heard of that, no. And I'm curious, like, what is the game plan with something like that? Because if you're not gonna like the goal is to not get you don't have a goal of getting a high school diploma. That's not part of the picture there. So what is the kid supposed to do after they're done with that? Like in your parents' mind, how do they map out how your life would go, to support yourself?
I
Well, get
honestly,
get married, have a husband, but that wouldn't for the boys. And how that yeah.
yeah, exactly. Nah, I wish I could tell you. And the thing is, they did it differently with all of my siblings than they did with me. So there's pretty decent age gaps between my siblings.
Okay.
So I have two older siblings that are part of a different marriage of my dad's. So they're my half siblings.
Mhm.
So their mom was like, we're not doing that. So they went to a Christian school. They had a compromise. They went to a Christian school. My two older siblings for a little bit, and then I think my brother ended up joining the army at 17 or something like that, pretty young.
Mhm.
And then my little sister, my parents enrolled her in like a homeschool group that met twice a week, and it had a curriculum
Okay.
that they followed, and they would actually go and meet with the state. So like I don't know what the game plan was for me, and I think that part of it was my learning disabilities. So I was diagnosed with ADD as a child,
Okay.
but because of the breed of insanity that my family is, they didn't medicate me. Um, like in any way, but they also choose to homeschool me, and that was a lot of my mom. I can acknowledge that they failed me in a lot of ways, but also acknowledge that I was probably a very tough little kid to teach. I still have a lot of time, a very hard time focusing. Actually, I'm thinking about this. I went back and I watched the first podcast interview that we did,
Mhm.
and it was through Zoom. And I thought that it would show up the way that it did on my screen, where like
Yeah.
the person who's talking is, yeah, you could see me the whole time. And I am very, I was like, wow, sit still, Liz. I was like, this is why teachers yelled. Like, I was in and out of homeschool groups various times. I did enough of whatever. And then I went to a beauty school, but I was like, this is why people would yell at you. Like, I'm
Yeah.
watching the YouTube clip back, like, oh my God. But, so I think my mom was just really struggling. And so I lived in Pennsylvania for like 4 years. And in the area of Pennsylvania where we lived at the time, there was like a group of other people that were doing the same thing with their kids. So my mom did it. And I don't know, man, because like if I hadn't been so hyper independent, what would I have done? I think they would just
Right. Yeah. Like
get
what's
there,
gonna it's man, it's
which I did.
so I admire might be the wrong word. Like I'm mystified at the courage of people who decide to homeschool their children. I mean, I understand like there's some legitimate reasons someone would want to. I'm not, disparaging everyone who does it, but look, how do I put this? I am I would say I'm of slightly above average intelligence. I would put it that way. And I would never trust myself to properly educate my kid in every single subject. I just couldn't imagine doing something like that. And yeah, you have curriculum, you have videos. Yeah, who cares? Like you need a teacher. And and I've seen the results of this, and it's weird because it's one way or the other. It's some of the smartest people I know were homeschooled, and then some of the absolute dumbest people. I'm way above. Thank you, Evan. I appreciate the compliment. I'll take it. I mean, you're probably correct, but I'm not going to be an asshole and say
Come in. That's cool.
yeah. So, yeah. So I'm always amazed by that. And you mentioned the science. I forgot what you were talking. Oh yeah, the evolution thing. So I started doing videos last year, and it was talking about mostly history books about how homes or Christian school history books and how they teach fascist propaganda, how they glorify the Confederacy, how it's just Christian nationalism. And I plan to do it on the science books too, because the evolution thing and the creation thing. And I never got to it at all. But it's weird to say, outside of the evolution stuff and the creation stuff, the science book was remarkably solid. I was actually impressed because I mean, hey, this is gravity, and objects fall towards the earth at 9.8 meters per second squared. And he's like, all right, that's true, and they just put it in there. So it's just always like had allusions to divine providence for all that. But if you just ignore all that, the science book was surprisingly good.
That was my experience with it too. I was always the most interested in science.
Mhm.
I found that a lot of the other things, just like looking back on my education now, were very whitewashed. But in speaking with a lot of my friends who have like gone to public schools, it other than like the religious aspect of it, which I would count the not believing in evolution as part of that. But
Oh
other
yeah.
than the religious aspect of it, my education seems very similar to the standard education that y'all receive. And I will say, my parents did not start the unschooling thing with me until I was maybe 10. So I had like elementary school where my mom tried. So
I'm just so weird. I've never heard of this. And it's just like it doesn't even seem to be because like other ones I can understand. Well, okay, we're gonna take our kids out of school and they'll have a Christian curriculum education, they're gonna have a classical education, whatever. But this one, I don't understand how anyone does it. Like that's what's the game plan here?
and I'm thinking about it, and I should have thought about this and like written it down because I have such a horrible memory of my childhood. But um, I think that when my mom decided, or when my parents, but it was mostly my mom, but when they decided to do it, it was going to be like a temporary thing. Because now I'm remembering them like helping me with GED prep, and I remember my mom like ordering me science like videos and stuff to help with high school. But it's funny, they would order them through this like one Christian website. Shout out to Answers in Genesis, so any of my
Oh,
fellow.
answers in Genesis. Oh my god.
Yeah, you're familiar with
Oh, they're the
apologetics.
worst. Yeah.
There,
I
yeah,
guess Ken Ham, right? Isn't that his?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. God, Ken
Gosh.
Ham. For those of you who don't know, Ken Ham is one of the foremost creationists on the planet, and he's always talking about how he has a book and he knows the Earth is 6,000 years old. And a long time ago, he did a debate with Bill Nye that was nationally televised. And I remember when this happened, and I said, I can't believe Bill Nye is doing this, because a lot of people were excited about it. I said, look, there is no universe in which Ken Ham's going to be like, oh, that's a good point. Oh my God, I hadn't thought about that. No, he's just going to, all you're doing is elevating the status of this, this clown. And it really disappointed me that he bothered to do it in the first place.
I think there's maybe a little bit to be said there about how debate culture has spiraled since then, and like who we give platforms to. But you say that when that debate came out, or that whatever debate, yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah.
I was still learning apologetics, and I was still like my evangelical Christian phase. And even I remember thinking, like, Ken Ham he didn't do well. Like, he didn't.
Because there's no good answers. There's none. There's nothing at all. Like, one person has evidence and one person has dogma. And if you're being objective, that's never going to work. I don't know. I just like it with debate culture too. Debate culture is the worst. It's so bad. I don't do debates. I used to do them like back in the Facebook days. I would like do the typing paragraphs debates with people and everything. I don't do it much anymore because I knew it back then, but now it's just really set home with me that debates aren't really about learning. Debates are about entertainment. That's the primary goal of a debate, is to find a way to get a zinger, and then maybe listen to find a good argument you could use quickly. But the other person's not going to change their mind, and you're probably not going to change the mind of the audience. You might, but in that case, I'm just going to talk to them. Like, I'm not going to bother having someone else there to tell me that, well, actually, the Earth is flat. No, all right, not interested. Sorry, go talk to somebody else. I hate it. And so I wanted to ask. So you said you're an Army brat or a military brat. I either I didn't know that, I forgot that. Which branch?
Army.
Army. Cool. That's good to know.
Yeah, my dad got out when I was relatively young, but that's what he did for a long time.
Good stuff. Good stuff. So how did you get into politics? Like, when did you first like get an interest in politics? You started doing content like a year and a half ago, but when did you get a big interest in it? So for people who don't know, growing up the way we did, politics and religion are pretty much intertwined. So you don't really have a choice. But when did you start getting into, I'd say, left of center politics?
Yeah, left of center. I grew up, I'm diagnosed with the ADD, ADHD. So I always asked a lot of questions. And so I don't know, I'm trying to remember. There was a certain point in my teenage years where people started getting like real frustrated with the questions that I was asking. And I do a lot of things out of spite. So like when people would get frustrated with me and not answer me, I would go and I would like research it further. And in 2014, my older brother, who's 9 years older than me, got out of the military and came to live with us for a little bit. And he's just like, I don't know how else to describe it, but like baby misogynistic. And so he would say things to me, and we would argue, and I wouldn't always have answers. And so I would go and I would do a lot of reading. And so I want to say like 14, 15 is when I just started reading like crazy. And then when I was 16 years old, my dad was picking me up from work one time. This was right before I got my license. And I was buying like Girl Scout cookies because there was a troop of Girl Scouts out front. And I don't know if you know this, but the Girl Scouts apparently donate to Planned Parenthood. And so that means to my conservative evangelical Christian father that this group of 8-year-olds is performing abortions. I don't know. Yeah. He was screaming at that. Like, he started screaming at them. Like, he started screaming at the girls? Children.
Whoa.
Like, it was crazy. Whoa. It was pretty crazy. But that for me was a pretty solid, like, I want nothing to do with anything of who you are. And like you mentioned just a second ago, a lot of times when you're raised in these environments, politics are sort of intertwined. Like, my dad would make me sit down and like watch Fox News with him when I was young, and like there was a buildup before that point, but that was like the tip of the iceberg. I'm like, you're gonna, like, you don't even know these kids. They're cookies, bro. Like, come on, like, simmer down. And and he did not simmer down. And he tried to kick me out of the house. It was crazy. I just remember my brother, he like pulled me to the side after it all calmed down. I was like packing up my stuff, and he was like, you just got to play the game. He's like, you're not doing well here, like constantly questioning him. He's like, you got to play the game. And so I was like, okay. And so I started like researching more what my dad was into, just researching everything, to try and just get better at ace right survival, because that was a crazy day. It spiraled like from him yelling at children, it got worse from there. And it like that there was around when I started getting into politics, and I started getting involved with like, I had friends that were very political. I was working, like I mentioned, from a young age, so I had a lot of friends that were older. I think I went to my first protest when I was 18, and my first tattoo when I was 18. It was like I was sort of slowly forced out the door by how extreme my background was and how extreme my family was. So yeah, and there was a point where I was trying to embrace it, but I think that looking back on it now, it was more of a survival thing, right? Like being
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
13. Yeah, I remember being like 13 when Facebook was semi new and like beefing with people, but like being the pro. I'm sorry, I call them forced birthers. What's the term for? What's the
Pro-life.
term for it? Pro-life. Thank you. I was like, I can't even remember it. But like I was raised to believe that was murder, and I would argue with people in Facebook comments, and like I think about the content that I make now, and I think about me being 13, and I'm like, I wonder how many people in my comments being like real are also 13 and just doing what they're taught and all of that. But there's a certain point, and this is why I have very little sympathy for a lot of people who were raised the same way that I was and continue to repeat those cycles. But there comes a certain point where you're like, the things that these people are preaching and the things that these people are doing don't align, right? And like, do you really want to associate with that? So
Yeah. So, and it is harder to get sympathy because, listen, I get back in the day before the proliferation of information on the internet and everything, but man, if you don't know by now, I mean, like the answers are right there. You can find the answers to all this shit, and you're lying about it, or you're just willfully ignorant. And then, all right, it's hard to feel, but I do feel so. It's hard to sympathy, man. I don't know which word I'm looking for here because I do feel something for them. Because, all right, example. So I've been at this for the anti-religion part, at least, or anti-fundamentalist Christianity, specifically for, man, maybe 10 years now, and I've gotten many, many messages over the years from people who said that I grew up with, that I knew, who said stuff like, TJ, I agree with everything you say. It makes a whole lot of sense, but I'm married and my spouse and my children all believe this stuff. And if I came out and said it, it would ruin my marriage. I actually do have sympathy for that. I do. Or someone who says that, I'm a preacher and this is my livelihood. Like it's like it's easy for me to just walk away from it, but when there's like all and look, because like I didn't tell my parents for a long time after I left Christianity because I didn't want them to worry about their son burning in hell. That's so I didn't want to put them through that, and so I do understand. That, but then again, I wasn't out there, shouting from the rooftops, how great this stuff was. That didn't happen. It's tricky that I refer to it when we both mentioned how it was innately tied with politics. And a friend of mine came up with this. I wish I would have. I hate so much that I didn't think about this myself, but he refers to it as a civic religion, which is exactly what it is. I mean, it's a religion that doesn't necessarily worship Yahweh or Jesus of Nazareth or their Holy Spirit. It worships, first it worships the United States of America, specifically a conservative interpretation of the United States of America. It worships capital and it worships white supremacy and it worships, xenophobia. Like that's it. That's what it actually worships. And it's so interwoven in the religion that they see it as one and the same. They don't realize they see it as one and the same either. When you talk to them about it, they don't actually see it that way, but that's the way it actually is in reality.
And a lot of them just will seek out churches wherein they can find other like-minded individuals to where they can and share that with. I would like to just circle back to what I said before. I you can have sympathy for the people, right? But I more so meant people who continue to repeat those cycles of like conservatism specifically, not religion. I think that
Gotcha.
religion in itself like is a little bit a part of human nature, right? There's so many different religions, but virtually every culture has some sort of concept of religion. So I don't know, I think it's would be ignorant of me to say that there is no religion. I know that's the next question we're going to get to in just a second here, but I don't think it's easy to walk away from any religion, and it certainly wasn't easy for me either, even though obviously, you know, kind of from all the preamble, but my relationship with my family isn't great, but it still wasn't easy for me to walk away from religion. One of the questions you sent me was, what did you begin to not identify with sooner, religion or conservatism? And it was definitely conservatism. Like it probably wasn't until my 20s when I started truly questioning and deconstructing religion. You know, that's
interesting.
Or Christianity, I should say.
Yeah. For me, it was the opposite, because I stopped. I would say I stopped being a Christian maybe around 21, maybe 22, somewhere around there. And from that point forward, I realized that a lot of my political beliefs were just a direct result of the fact that I had, this Christian indoctrination that told me, because it didn't, because it's kind of like how whenever people bring up stuff like, say we're arguing for universal school lunches or something, and they're like, well, this is gonna cost a lot of money and we don't get that money back. Well, I don't care. Like I don't like I don't care at all. It doesn't matter. That's kind of the way I viewed it as a religious conservative, that so trickle down economics doesn't work. Well, okay, but this is the right thing to do. Like, this is the Protestant work ethic. This is what we have to go. So it allowed me, like, the ends didn't really matter, because the morale. It's like with gay marriage, when you ask Republicans like, oh, what's the problem? It's like, well, it doesn't matter. It's immoral. It's evil. And so that's kind of how. So it's interesting. I find that's usually what happens. So you're kind of the exception right there, at least in my experience.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. And what I have written down, I was writing so sloppy whenever I try to get this here. But so I want to talk about too, since it's kind of a wild card here, where we talked about growing up with religion. I had a conversation with a friend of mine earlier this week, and she was talking about how my experience would have been, because I grew up Christian fundamentalists, not a lot of black folks, and white evangelicalism. Like, we were always like one of the only black families, maybe one or two black families in the whole congregation. It was like that when I went to a fundamentalist college and everything. And she talked about, how difficult it must have been to deal with the racism, which I knew was there. But I always say that it's actually, I thought it was way worse for women than it was for, black people, because
interesting.
Because like, they don't come right out and say stuff like black people can't be pastors, or black people need to be subservient. Those terms never need to leave their lips, but they say it about women all the time with no shame whatsoever. And so, like, your experience as a woman or a girl back then, like, how can you tell us about that?
It was infuriating. There's just so much of religion, it seems, is built upon the subjugation of women. Like, it truly just does feel that way. But yeah, and I went to many different churches, both because my family was in the military, but also because my father was really good at getting kicked out of churches and having to go find new ones. So even if we didn't move, we would sometimes go through 2 to 3 churches a state. But yeah, there was very few, none that we ever went to. That was probably on purpose on his end, but very few churches have I ever seen that are, allow women into any sort of leadership positions. And I find it very interesting.
Why did your dad keep getting kicked out of churches? What was he doing?
Oh my gosh, he just so many things. He would always beef with people about different things. Like, I'm trying to think, what's coming to mind is at one point he tried to start his own church, and everyone decided that they didn't want to go to it because he threw a fit about one of the kids coming to like the alternative Halloween thing he did, because we didn't celebrate Halloween. It was something else, some sort of festival he did. But he was like, y'all come to this. And some little girl came dressed as a witch, and he, he really likes screaming at children. Huh.
Wow. That's so listen. I grew up with some like real hardcore people. They did some awful shit. I don't think I ever saw anyone like yell at Girl Scouts or small like that is fucking psychotic. I don't even want to blame the religion on that. That's just on him. Like that's just the kind of guy he is apparently.
Yes. Yes. And like I say pretty frequently, abusive people groom their character witnesses just as often as they groom their victims. But occasionally my dad's mask would slip. And so like when he had it on, he was pretty good. Like people generally liked him. And it would be like shocking almost because he would snap and then he would lose his mind and he would start screaming at a little girl on Halloween dressed up in a little witch hat. It's like, relax. And so people, they tried to have some sort of like intervention for him and he was like, nope, witches are of the devil. And so they stopped. And it was always things like that.
That's weird. Wow. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to hear that. That's awful. That's
so a lot of it out.
Yeah, well, yeah. This is something I talk about a lot with Donald Trump because so back in 2016, Trump got 81% of the white evangelical vote. And in 2020, he got, I think, 75 or 76% of the white evangelical vote. So when you talk to, like, you see a lot of them online posting how Trump is great and he's awesome. You talk to them one-on-one, you're like, okay, square this circle for me. Because like my entire life, I've heard you guys talk about how important it is that we have a leader who's a man of character, someone who actually, even if they don't believe in God, that they have biblical principles because that will guide the nation. And why do we, throw that to the side all of a sudden? Like, oh, well, they go with the King David example because King David was a piece of shit, and they love the King David example and everything. And it's like, no, shut the fuck up. David was a competent politician and military commander. You cannot say that shit about Donald Trump. And it's just, it is. Oh, people were surprised. Like outsiders are like, I can't believe all these, white evangelicals just abandoned their principles and went for Trump. It didn't surprise me at all because Trump reminds me a lot of several preachers that I met as a Christian evangelical. Like his temperament is very similar to these folks.
Yeah, and I mean you touched on it earlier, but I think I don't know if I'm going to be able to phrase this right, but there's a little bit of shame that I think that these people have about a lot of their bigoted ideas. And then there are some groups where like they don't care. They'll be openly homophobic, they'll be openly sexist. But I think that at least a lot of the spaces and a lot of the racism that I was privy to, they were a little bit ashamed of it. So that a lot of that would happen in mostly like white spaces. So I was not surprised at all when all of these fucking white Christian folk rallied around Trump because I hear what they say behind closed doors and I would hear, how they talked about their neighbors, right? The people that Jesus called them to love. What did you describe it? What did your friend describe it as?
A civic religion.
A civic religion. And so, no, it was not shocking. And I remember I was 2016 was when Trump got elected. I was a teenager and like, I wasn't old enough to vote. I was like, he's going to win. Like, I remember like thinking then, because I was still in those spaces and the majority of people I knew were going to vote for him. It did not matter what, and it still does not matter. That
no, it doesn't. It still doesn't.
It doesn't. And it didn't matter then that he had been found of guilty and accused of all sorts of terrible things, like because he allowed them this sort of open avenue to finding more bigoted people like them and being able to do it out loud and with acceptance, instead of having to be ashamed of how they
Trump mainstreamed euphemism-free bigotry. That's what Trump mainstreamed. Because, like, in the past, the bigotry was still there, but it was, couched behind, these phrases that this miasma. You had to kind of decipher what they meant by it. And Trump is like, well, rather, smartly said, okay, well, why bother with that? Just say it out loud. And other politicians are afraid to do that. And Trump said, no, I'm going to do it. And it worked. And it's not just that they like him. They like him more. They like think about the popular, even before the January 6th thing, compare the popularity of Mike Pence to Donald Trump. Mike Pence is ostensibly everything these people say they actually care about. Like he represents all of their beliefs, all of their values. And, Trump doesn't, I don't even think Trump believes in God. I don't believe for a second that Trump believes in God. I always joke that it's ironic that, we got our first atheist president and it's Donald fucking Trump, of all people. It's pretty funny. But, what I have found very interesting about this is the fact that politically what they're doing makes sense. It does. If someone, let's say there was a candidate X and he believed everything I believed when it came, or he supported every policy I wanted, but he was a piece of shit. He was a horrible human being. He was a disgrace. But if he's backing everything I want, I okay, all right, I'm still voting for him. I gotta tell you, like I am, because like I'm actually gonna get now what I want. And so that's the way they're looking at it. They're looking at it as for a practical political sense, which makes sense. However, what's more important to them, supposedly, is their faith and their religion and bringing people closer to God. And on that sense, it is suicide. Like they have pretty much destroyed their entire movement because the world saw that their beliefs are incredibly hollow. They're vapid. They don't mean anything. And they will sell them out in a fucking second if it means that they can grant themselves political power. We saw it, they saw it, and most importantly, their children saw it because their kids are, they're however old they are, 10, 11, 15, 16. They're like, okay, so this stuff doesn't really matter to you, and they're already finding out more and more about the nature of reality and everything with the internet, that the religion is going to, or that sect of the religion is going to evaporate with the next generation. They've guaranteed that, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah, I think that we're at a little bit of a weird point in history where that is absolutely true, right? We're at the age where we were seeing our parents grow up sort of forcing us, teaching us all of these good values, and then not practicing what they preach when it comes to electing these people into office. But we're at an interesting point in history where I think we're going to see a big rise in the what's the word, people who are going into cults, and whether or not Christianity turns into something like that, more of like a cult maybe. But I think that that is why a lot of people do still go to church. Capitalism has stripped us of all of our third spaces, except for churches, right?
Yeah.
And people are finding it increasingly more difficult to live without community support. I think are going to be looking for community support and are going to be met with cults. So,
yeah. And see, that's something that unfortunately churches still remain fairly important in American culture, not so much in Western European culture. They've kind of dwindled. Say what?
That's what I've heard. Yeah,
They've kind of dwindled away. But the United States is still going pretty strong. But then again, there's stronger social safety nets in Western Europe. So the whole, and there's walkable cities and universal education. So the community aspect is still alive and well, or at least better than ours. And so people are just grasping for that. And that's something you mentioned earlier, how religion is kind of innate in human biology. It seems to me it does make sense. It makes a lot of sense. Although it's nonsense, but we're communal animals, and individually humans are not impressive at all. There's not a whole lot we can do. We're not particularly fast or strong. Sure, we're pretty smart, but that only gets you so far. But working in groups, we can literally go to the moon. I mean, like we're amazing. We sell ourselves short a lot of times talking shit about human beings, but we are a goddamn impressive species. And it's the teamwork element that's important. And so if you put yourselves in the mind of your average human being 200,000 years ago, just trying to survive on the African savannah, and when your group of 150, 200 people, whatever, these people, you're related to most of them, you get along, you trust them. You run across another group, you have no idea if they're trustworthy or not. No clue. Like you don't know if they're out marauding, if they're going to steal your supplies. You have no idea. And so because you have no common bond. But you talk to them and they say, "Oh, we worship the moon god." Like, "Oh my god, I worship the moon god too." Now you've got a bond. Now you've got something, that connects you when otherwise you wouldn't. And then you work together. And so the people who didn't have that that inclination to trust people that believed in this fairy tale were more likely to die. And we're the result. We're the progeny of the people who thought working together for a fairy tale made sense. And so to me, it does make sense that way.
It does. No, it absolutely does. And you see that across various.
Yeah, you do.
Every
You do.
culture throughout.
You do, yeah. It's not. So I want to ask you, what are your current beliefs in the supernatural, or the numinous, or the anything like that?
Oof, I have a hard time identifying with any specific label right now.
Hmm.
I definitely believe in something. I know that that's very vague. I guess agnostic atheist is the term. I don't know if the Christian God, the way that I was raised to believe in the Christian God, is what's out there. But I don't think we're here by ourselves. And
Yeah. Huh. That's not an answer I expected. Because you said you're still open to the Christian God, the existence of, or at least the God like that's described in the Bible.
wait, I'm sorry. Say that again.
So you said you're still open to the idea that the Christian God might be real, like the one described in the
Oh,
Bible.
no. I don't think that he is real,
Oh,
but I
gotcha.
think that there's something. But
Yeah.
the Christian God, the way that I was raised to believe
Okay, gotcha.
in the Christian God.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So when I left my faith because we had at my university we had a week long week long course that happened, like chapel sessions, and it was called Baptist Heritage. And basically the point of it was we are going to tell you why Baptists are the correct denomination. And I was very excited for this. I was like, all right, finally, I get to find out why my denomination is correct and everyone's not. At the end of those 5 days, every single person said pretty much the same thing. Baptists are correct because we follow the Bible. And I said, you've got to be. It's kind of like I had the feeling you had watching Ken Ham. Probably it's like this is the least impressive shit I've ever seen. Like that's what everyone would say. How could you possibly say this and not feel embarrassed? So I did my own study. I did a deep dive into how the New Testament specifically, how the New Testament canon was put together, and how we know it's the divine inspired word of God. And I got to tell you, the results I found were not comforting at all. And then at that point, I realized that because for people who don't know, the New Testament canon was put together honestly rather quickly. It was put together about 150 years after Jesus, and we don't know who wrote the Gospels. They're all anonymous. The closest thing we have to a writing of a contemporary of Jesus are the works of Paul. And Paul wrote his epistles around AD 55, something like that. And Paul admits he never met the guy. He never met Jesus. He saw him in a vision, if that, yeah, but who cares about that? And people had competing canons. And then around AD 300, I think it was the Council of Hippo, uh, these bishops decided, okay, we're gonna, canonize it as the word of God. People who had no more apostolic authority than you or me. It literally be no different than if we decided what the Bible was. I was like, all right, this doesn't make any sense. From that point forward, I couldn't call myself a Christian anymore. I couldn't. It didn't make any sense. But I still did believe in something. It's like you said, because like to me, it just seemed like I probably the same things you think, or a lot of other people think, is that well, first off, why is there something other than nothing? Which is a question. Yeah, how did this all get here? And I didn't believe that there was a God who necessarily cared about human interactions, and I certainly didn't think you could pray to him or he had punishment or reward waiting for us when we died. But there had to be some sort of divine mover or divine artificer that got this all going. But after a while, I started thinking, okay, well, what's the difference between a God that doesn't interact with us at all and one that doesn't exist? Like, oh, there's really no difference at all. So I just kind of realized I was an atheist and kind of went into that.
Very relatable.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough, and losing your faith in God. Well, so for me, it was a really difficult experience. Not just because of the people you lose, like the personal connections, but losing God hurts because God wasn't like people don't understand this. Like God wasn't a thought experiment. Like it was a metaphysical certitude. God was just as real as the ground I was standing on. And I always say that losing my faith felt like losing a limb. Yeah, I lost someone I loved. And can you relate to that experience?
It wasn't nearly that intense for me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if this was just again being neurodivergent or what, but I always sort of struggled with feeling that a connection to anything or anyone. For me, it sort of eased a lot of anxieties that I was wrestling with regarding like eternity and even just reconciliation with like some of the scriptures themselves. The idea that I might not believe in this entity.
Yeah, yeah.
It was a little bit more comforting to me. But I've seen people go through this deconstruction process, and it seems like it can be incredibly painful.
Yeah, yeah. It is very freeing though to not have to defend the slaughter of the Amalekites or stuff like that. It's like, look at that. I don't gotta say shit about that because I don't believe it's true anymore. So, but to the group that we grew up in, do you think people or maybe us, like, do people overestimate or underestimate how powerful they are in politics? Because I find myself swinging both ways on this because, like, sometimes I think people don't understand because they're a significant voting block, and they do a lot of damage. But that time, it's like they are not anywhere near a majority of the country. Like it's maybe 25% or something, and they're dwindling. They're dying too. So, which do you like? Where do you fall on if we overrepresent, underrepresent, or get it right?
Oh man, the thing is, they all vote. Like they are there at
They do. They do.
every election, local, like they're there voting. So while they are not indicative of, I think, the majority of the country, they are probably some of the most consistent voters, at least in my experience around conservative.
Yeah. That's something I say that, look, I don't have a lot of nice things to say about the evangelical, Christian right, but I gotta hand it to them. They put in the fucking work. They did. That Roe v. Wade came down, segregation or integration started, and for 50 years now, they have been on it. They ran for school boards, city councils. They vote like guaranteed rock solid votes, and they've done it for a lifetime now, and they're seeing the results. It's finally paying off for them, and I do got to hand it to them that they put feet to their actions, their thoughts.
Yeah, they definitely practice what they preach in that way.
In that way, at least, yeah.
Yeah,
that way. Loving your neighbor. I don't know about that one, but yeah. It's yeah. Go ahead.
But yeah, I don't know, but I do think you're right in that the children of a lot of these, at least extremist Christians, I don't know if that's a good term for them.
No, perfectly good term. Yeah.
Yeah, they're sort of seeing it for what it is, especially in the age of the internet. And so I do think we will see a mass exodus from evangelical Christianity as a religion here pretty soon.
Yeah, and it's an older demographic anyway. I mean, it's like it can't survive, long like this. But so what do you think? So I guess this kind of ties in there. What do you think about the future of American religiosity? Because the fewer and fewer people believe in God, or either they're not necessarily a giant wave of atheists or anything, but a lot of people don't identify with any religion. A lot more people who are saying, well, I don't know, I'm open either way. But so, like, how do you think this trend is going to continue to evolve over time?
I touched on it a little bit before, but I really do think we're going to see a rise in cultism. We're already seeing sort of an increase in spirituality. I think that religion, the acknowledgement of higher powers, that sort of, I think that is a little bit inherent to humanity. Like people
Yes.
want something bigger to believe in and to practice on. And when we look at the scientific part of it, this was interesting to me during my deconstruction. It's just how many religious practices do things like stimulate your vagus nerve, like praying, meditating, singing, especially singing together in groups of people. All of that can like fundamentally, like from your course, like calm you down. And so it makes sense that a lot of people feel better doing these religious practices. There's scientific backing to that. But we're seeing a rise in spiritualism. People want something to believe in. A rise in people being needy, right? Just having basic needs that aren't being met by their jobs. People can work full time and still not afford to live right now. That's crazy. And then touched on before, a lack of these third spaces, a lack of community, a lack of all of these places to go. I think we're going to see an increase in vulnerability among people, and there's going to be that gap is going to be filled with people who recruit for cults. And I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong about that, but that's what I see coming in the next couple of decades here. I think we're at a prime social point for that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Depending on the cult, I would probably join one. I
Depending how
could use
cool
some
it is on the
refresh.
snacks. I wonder what you guys offering. Yeah.
Routine, like
Well, and the
meals
thing
every
is, the
fun.
thing is that people really want a purpose. No one
Yeah,
wants to live their life thinking that, there's no point to anything I do. If that's the case, why bother getting out of bed? And nobody wants that. And religion offers you a great purpose. Like, for at least the one that we grow up in, essentially, you get every Sunday you get told that you're Luke Skywalker. Like you are chosen to, be on a mission for God, capital G God, the only one who exists. And so get out there and put on the full armor of God and fight the devil who's a roaring lion walking about seeking whom he may devour. That's cool as hell. Like you've got something, you have a real purpose in life. And so without that, you're just kind of searching for one. And it's like you always see these stats about how religious people are happier than non-religious people. It's like, well, yeah, of course. I mean, if you think that you're on a special mission from the creator of the universe, you're gonna feel pretty good about it. You're gonna feel pretty good compared to someone who's like, yeah, I'm here, and that's it. So yeah, the cult thing's interesting. I never really thought about that, about a rise in cult activity. And so back in the French Revolution, for anyone who is unfamiliar with this, they got rid of everything related to the clergy for a very good reason. The church was wildly corrupt, and they all knew it. And so they replaced things like they got rid of the 7-day week because the 7-day week came from the Bible. They tried a 10-day week. That's when we got. I'm pretty sure that's where the meter came from as a standard unit of measurement. And they tried to secularize all of their culture, but they realized, or Robespierre at least realized, that what we're talking about, that human beings need something bigger than themselves to function, like, or you'll go crazy without it. I mean, even I, as an atheist, believe in a lot of things bigger than myself. The list is not long, but he came up with something called the cult of the what was it called? The cult of the universal being, I think. And he had like this goofy ass statue, and he had people singing to it. It didn't last. Everyone laughed their asses off how ridiculous it was. But yeah, I think you're right. I think that, but I never thought about the fact that people would start falling into cults. But what else are they going to do, especially when there's no, social cohesion with a lot of people? It's a good point. Kind of sad to think about, but it's an interesting concept to ponder.
well, I mean, I don't know. Think of how many just sects of evangelical Christianity are cult-like in the way that they operate, and especially the way they treat um, women. I mean, you said it earlier, but I think of IBLP. I don't know if you've ever heard of.
Oh my
Bill
God!
Gothard. Yeah.
So I all right. It's funny because a friend of mine who I went to school with, and I don't remember her from school. So she found me on TikTok, and she was
Wait,
talking about
you said you don't remember her from school?
from college.
Oh,
Yeah, and so she mentioned something about IBLP. I've never heard of them, but then she was Bill Gothard. I have heard of Bill Gothard. I'm very familiar with. I didn't know it was called IBLP, but go ahead. Sorry.
okay. So but you know who he is.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Even as you're describing, it's interesting that this man who was never married, didn't have any children, built this entire denomination that we still see or little ripples of the way that he structured, that sect of Christianity. We still see them in at least a lot of the churches that I was a part of. But yeah, he essentially just started and operated this cult, and they run, I don't know if they still do, but they used to run like re-education camps and things like that young children would go to. It's just
it's they kind of give the game away too with how incredibly obsessed they are with sex. I mean, it is to creepy levels up, and the what happens, with people like that we see all the time. Like, like if any other organization had as many, sex crimes rampant through it'd be burned to the ground tomorrow morning. But it's okay because Christianity gets a pass, no matter what. And how this goes back to, I think, how women are treated even worse than black people in this movement, and how it teaches women and girls. I mean, it starts with the girls to just view themselves as innately sexual. And it's something that I didn't even think about until, honestly, embarrassingly recently, like maybe 10 years ago or something, that I didn't realize it, that just your existence is sexual. Like just being there is an affront to the morality of men, and you need to like literally cover yourself in a in a burlap sack. I remember once I was in 10th grade in a Christian school, and we had a girl in my class, and we she was getting ready for gym class, and I remember she was putting on socks in like the auditorium where we sat in now, and one she was like, hey, that's inappropriate, go do that somewhere else. And I sat there thinking, how the hell is putting on socks? It was years later, I was like, oh yeah, like foot fetish stuff, that was probably like his thing. And so like seeing a girl putting on socks, but because like that's the only way it makes sense. It doesn't make sense in
It
any
doesn't make
other
sense
possible. Yeah.
other way. Like what?
Yeah, and you see this shit all the time. Like you see this shit all the time, and how you're taught to just you're taught to like hate your physical body, and for men it's like it's not great for men either. But I mean it's like for your young boys, and how they teach you to despise natural urges that you have, and it's like this is. I wish that liberals could understand this. I think they're getting it more and more these days, but liberals will often talk about how these evangelical groups, they don't really believe this stuff. They're just saying it, it's like, no, like there's a lot of people who take this to heart, and it hurts a lot of folks. Like they preach it, and they require it of their children or their students or their congregation, and it does unimaginable damage to millions of people, and it needs to be called out. Like we can't just pretend that it's just like a social club they go to. Like this is some horrible shit.
Yeah. Someone in the comments of my TikTok live said they teach girls that shame should be the baseline emotion that should be experienced, and it's absolutely true. I mean, I was in a youth group one time that taught the girls to take their seatbelt. You know how a seatbelt has the two
Oh
straps,
no.
and put it underneath their stomach so that it didn't like cross in between.
Oh my
Like,
god.
but just like think about how messed up that is, where you're prioritizing the you don't want to cause your brother to stumble over the safety of sometimes children, right? But like really young women, like it's
It's
not a
it's
good environment.
yeah, and the more you think about it, the more sense it makes about how people turn out, like this. Because it's real sad talking to someone like this who's like 70 years old. It's just, there's nothing you can do for them. It's over. Like
Yeah.
it's just done. Like it may be someone 45 or under. There might be some hope for them, but you talk to a boomer who's been raised in this their entire life, and they think that everyone else is crazy. There's no shot. I do feel kind of sorry for those folks, because they didn't have a chance to possibly get out of that, because everyone they knew thought the same thing. If I was in their shoes, I'd be just like them. So it is sad. Yeah, it is sad, but we have to acknowledge reality that they're probably not going to be able to be saved.
And then touching back on just a couple of things we were talking about earlier, when it comes to these online debates, I think that's one of my biggest problems with them, is just the inherent nature of like you're out to win, right? You're not out to find common ground or actually converse. It's a competition. And but I think when you sit down and you talk to a lot of these people, a lot of them, they truly believe this stuff, and they're just misinformed. Like we in America, we're one of the most heavily propagandized countries in the world. Like we have entire sections, 3-letter organizations in our government that are created to, feed us information. And that's pretty crazy. So like I can't blame people for believing the things that they believe, especially when it comes down to things like abortion, and all of that. But I think that's why it's important for people to sit down and have these conversations with their family and with their community.
Yeah.
Not online yelling at people.
Pointless. Yeah. I figured out a long time ago that the only interactions that I had that bore any fruit were like one-on-one messages. Like, because like when you say something out in public and you get called out, it's really hard to admit, oh, you got me there. That's difficult. People, it hurts. Like people don't like to do it. And shit, wasn't gonna say. You're talking about people finding stuff out, but I don't know. I found that the best way is to just kind of talk to them one-on-one, and that usually won't work either. Got to be real. Like it'll probably take years, if ever, that to get around. That's why I don't focus on that. That's a tertiary responsibility as far as I'm concerned. But most of them can't be saved. However, the ones that can be saved are worth saving. That's how I try to go for it.
Yeah, I think most people aren't beyond redemption, right? Like there are a lot of people, and the people that often scream the loudest in most organizations, right? The ones that are super bought into to this. But a lot of people, like, they hear something, they're taught something from when they're super young, and that's what they grow up believing, and they don't really ever look into it until you have a conversation with them, and then they do.
Yeah,
They like,
especially if it's reinforced by every possible avenue in society.
yeah.
And honestly, if you grow up in the United States of America just being taught in public education, you're going to come out pretty conservative. I mean, think about what's just taught as just standard stuff, not thought of as propaganda at all. You're taught that this is the greatest country in the history of the world. Our nation is blessed by God, and we operate under His auspices. That's the founding
Pledge of
fathers.
Allegiance
Yeah,
is weird.
exact. Yeah, like
It's
the
really
founding
weird.
fathers were great men. Sure, they made some mistakes here or there, but their intentions were noble. So even questioning them, you're starting to insult the foundings of this great nation. The police are your friends. It's all the all of our wars have been justified. I mean, like if that's not state propaganda, please tell me what state propaganda would sound like to you. Like, and that's what everybody is taught in this country, like from birth, on. Yeah, it's wild to think about.
Yeah, yeah. And so yeah, I've
Yeah,
tried since I've been on TikTok, I've tried to alter my approach a little bit to the way that I converse with people, but it's always been my experience because I've been talking to these people interpersonally a lot longer than I've been talking to people online, but one-on-one conversations always end up going better.
wait a minute, how have you altered your approach of how you speak to people on TikTok or converse?
I used to be a lot more I don't want to say aggressive with it, but I used to be a lot more aggressive with it. Like I would just be like, this is how it is, and if you believe this, you can have your opinion, but you're wrong. But I've simmered down a little bit. I've tried to
So in my experience, if you're going to publicly do this, what works for, well, then again, different people have different approaches, but maybe it's just fun for me. But I've found that bullying them and challenging their masculinity and making it comedic, solid gold. Like it is incredible because like
yeah.
it's you ever have someone insult you, but even you thought the joke was funny? Like
Absolutely.
yeah, it does.
That's a skill.
Yeah, it doesn't burn quite as much, and you think about it and everything. And so I honestly like bullying and a-mogging. It's the only language they understand. It's it. You can't subvert them by appealing to the better angels of their nature. They don't exist.
No, you're right. I'm inclined to agree with you. And shame is one of the few ways to make societal adjustments, right? You want people to stop doing a thing, make it shameful to do that thing. And they'll stop eventually, right? But also I think that there are a lot of people who have good intentions and are ill-informed, and
fuck them. That's how I see it. Look, I mean, you got good intentions, but they have horrible results. I'm gonna make fun of you for not being able to figure that out. And
it depends on the context too, right? Like if you're out here supporting XYZ thing that the outcome is incredibly harmful, fuck you. Like I don't care what your intentions are, fuck you. But a lot of these people who identify as Christian, I think, are stuck in that rut of like just ill-informed, grew up being taught that from the moment they were born, and here we are.
Yeah. And what I love with this is you get into these debates with people. Have you ever had this happen where so people like us, like, look, you can say that we're wrong, you can say that we're ill-informed, you can say that we're lying, but one thing you cannot say is that, oh, you guys are dumb. You don't that never happens. Like it doesn't. And so oftentimes I'll have an interaction with my favorites is when they're like, hey, look, man, I know we disagree, but you're really smart. Like you've really done the work, and I appreciate your intelligence. I'm just like, thanks. Because they're expecting me to say it back, and I don't, which I don't have to. And so it's always funny to me because they've ceded away all their power. It's like, you let me know you think I'm intelligent, and I'm not going to reciprocate the gesture. And I find it very funny, but it also It lets me know that they respect my opinion, whether they agree or not, and it's going to sit with them for a while. It may not be successful, but that's the way I deal with it.
Yeah, I mean, to use the Christian term on you here, you're planting the seeds, right?
Planting the seed. Yeah,
You
there you
can
go.
hope they go think about it later.
Yeah, exactly. That's
People
it.
do. Like, that's
Yeah.
I have had people come back to me in the short time that I've been making content and be like, something you said resonated with me. I've thought about it further, and now I think something different. I'm like, that's crazy, because I'm not like you. I call myself dumb all the time. I'm like, listen, I'm not the smartest person in the room, but you really think this? And like, we're gonna talk about it like we're stupid, because that's my approach to things. Is a little different.
Yeah, there's different avenues to get there. The ones that are most fun for me are the ones that I really enjoy. But that is the most fulfilling part of any of these exercises, is when someone comes back and they're like, "Hey, look, something you said really resonated. It got me thinking a whole lot more." And I live for those moments. Those moments I think are great. It kind of makes it all worth it, because you get so used to seeing like the idiots, just brazenly admitting how dumb they are. And by the way, that's a good point. It's like, you actually don't need to be all that smart to figure this out. You don't. Like, it's very simple. It is very simple. If you just getting out of the, it's like what Mark Twain said. It's easier to fool people than to convince them they have been fooled. Like it's a lot difficult. It's a lot more difficult to kind of break out of that. But we do what we can do. We're just individual people.
Yeah, and
Just-
you just try to have fun
Yes.
with it.
Just trying our best.
For me, I think a big part of making content has been just sort of a scrapbook and a broadcasting of my deconstruction journey. So it's like, it's as I learn and grow, you're all watching
Yeah.
me do that, and I think that's pretty cool.
And it's fun. And a bonus point for us is that we also know that they are more people from their side are going to defect to our side than our side to theirs. Like, that almost never happens. And so, the odds are on our side. So, it's hard. I respect anybody who makes content, because it's not easy. Like, putting yourself out there is very difficult. And I have extra respect for women who do it, because whoo boy, I've seen the stuff that they say to women. It is brutal. I am amazed that any woman makes content at all, because it is awful out there. But
I'm gonna be so honest with you, TJ. I don't even read my comments sometimes on Instagram. Don't read them.
No, I don't blame you. Listen, I joked a lot with the guys of the podcast, and it says, like, I don't read those comments. I don't, like, because I did once, and like for some reason there's like a ton of right wing comments. I was like, yeah, I'm not doing that. Like, I'm not
On
like,
Instagram, right?
no, on YouTube, because like, right wingers live off just watching shit that they hate. I do not sit around watching like Matt Walsh videos. I don't. Every once in a while I'll run across a clip someone posts, but to go to like his YouTube channel and watch a 7 or 8 minute, why would I do that to myself? But right wingers live for that shit. It's why when they were trying to start those right wing Twitter clones, like what was it, Gab or Parlor, they don't work, because right wingers need somebody to hate in order to have some sort of communal experience, and it always falls apart. But yeah,
that is their communal experience, is hate.
Yeah, they need that. It's about rage. And so I don't read YouTube comments. I don't read Instagram. I have like almost nothing there, but I rarely read those comments. And I wish I could. I don't read TikTok comments a lot, except for the fact that TikTok, it kind of makes you, because whenever you open
there's
it up,
no really way to filter.
God, I hate that so much. I wish that they would allow you to mute comments from videos. I wish that, but every time you open it up, here's 9 comments, and you're gonna read 1 or 2 of them, and so whatever. It gives you a fun video to make sometimes, but that's it.
Sometimes I'll type out my response and I'll get it all out, and then I'm like, this isn't worth it, and I'll just delete it all and scroll on by. I'm like, all right.
Yeah, I know.
Better for my mental health, though.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Sometimes I fall into the trap. It happens, but whatever. But
I've started doing that on other people's videos now, because I'm like, if I'm gonna fight with somebody, at least I can boost one of my mutuals' engagement. So if I see someone comment something nasty on your video, you might see me in the comments.
I like that. That's a good way to judo this into something good. That's a pretty good idea. But
and it gets out because that's always been something you said you used to do at the debates on Facebook. I used to do it too. And a therapist that I saw for a short time told me once that it can be a way that people, get dopamine or something? Like, the online interactions can like stimulate people with ADHD's brain, and things like
Oh
that.
yeah.
I was like, but it's a thing, I
Huh.
guess. So
Yeah, yes. Don't read the comments. I agree, Evan. Don't read the comments. I agree with that. But hey, event. Liz, thank you so much for coming on board today. I really enjoyed talking to you. I loved having you on the show, and I knew you'd be a great guest. Valuable insight, and just a pleasant person all around. From what I know of you, from like the 4 hours of interaction I've had with you, I'm gonna gauge your entire life based on that. But seems pretty good.
we got pretty deep just now. So I mean,
Yeah,
I
pretty good. Good
appreciate
stuff.
that.
I've seen a lot worse people I've known for 4 hours. I tell you that. So I guess I'm a pretty good judge of that. But would you like to plug your content to the folks out there?
Oh, you can find me pretty much everywhere. All About Liz. I'm on Instagram. All About Liz Spam, and that's ALLBOUT. No
Cool.
A in about. All About Liz. I'll
Thank you
change it
so.
eventually, but
That's all good. All right, Liz. Thanks so much. Appreciate you
awesome.
coming on.
Thank
Have
you,
a good
TJ. I
one.
appreciate it. Have a great
Bye.
rest of your day.